On Thanksgiving dinner, my daughter-in-law boasted triumphantly, "Now I'm in charge of this house. Your accounts are frozen for your own safety." Everyone applauded like idiots, celebrating my defeat. I leaned toward my son and whispered, "Boy, are you really blind to all this?" He instantly turned white as a ghost, covered in sweat. She barked, "Blind? To what?" They didn't even realize what hit them. But this old IRS auditor had already started his game, and the daughter-in-law's betrayal won't go unpunished. Before listening to this story, we have an important announcement for you. Unfortunately, we are discontinuing this channel, and it will be deleted soon. If you want to continue listening to new stories, subscribe to our new channel, Cold Revenge. The link to it will be in the collaboration with this video, in the description of this video, and in the comments. Thank you for your attention. My name is Harold Kennedy. I'm 68 years old, living in Nashville, Tennessee, in a house I paid off 23 years ago. Spent 3 decades as a senior auditor for the IRS, catching people who thought they were smarter than the system. Retired in 2019, thinking I'd finally have peace. Turns out the most sophisticated fraud I'd ever encounter was happening right under my own roof. Let me tell you about my son Derek. He wasn't always the man who can't meet my eyes across the dinner table. I remember teaching him to ride a bike in our backyard, his little hands gripping the handlebars. "Don't let go, Dad," he'd yell. I never did, not until he was ready. Derek is 42 now, works as a mid-level manager at a logistics company. Decent job, decent salary. But somewhere along the way, my boy lost his spine. I watched it happen slowly, like rust eating through metal. It started 4 years ago when he brought Vanessa home. Vanessa Price, now Vanessa Kennedy. She's 38, with the kind of smile that makes you check your wallet afterward. When Derek first introduced her, she was all charm. "Mr. Kennedy, your home is beautiful. Derek talks about you constantly." She squeezed my hand with both of hers. Her eyes never blinked. I've interviewed hundreds of people during my career. Embezzlers, tax evaders, fraudsters. They all have one thing in common. They oversell. Too friendly. Too eager. Vanessa checked every box, but Derek was smitten. And what was I supposed to say? They married 18 months later. 3 years ago, after my wife passed, the house felt too empty. When Derek suggested he and Vanessa move in to keep me company, I agreed. Thought it might be nice. Thought wrong. The changes came gradually, so subtle I almost missed them. First, small things. "Dad, it would be easier if I handled the utility bills. You know, one less thing for you to worry about." That was Vanessa, 6 months after moving in. Her voice was honey sweet. Then, "We should consolidate the accounts, for simplicity. Derek and I can manage all the paperwork. And you shouldn't bother yourself with these financial details at your age. Let us handle everything." At my age, I was 65. I'd spent 30 years untangling the most complex financial schemes the IRS had ever seen. But sure, paying an electric bill was apparently beyond me now. I noticed other things too. Conversations that stopped dead when I entered a room. Documents left on the kitchen counter that vanished before I could examine them. My mail arriving already opened. "Oh, I thought it was junk mail, sorry," Vanessa would say with that sweet, apologetic smile. She calls herself a financial consultant. No license, no credentials. Just a few private clients she advises on their investments. I looked her up once, found nothing. No certifications, no professional history, no LinkedIn profile. Just a woman who was very, very good at making people trust her. Her older sister Peggy visits often. 64 years old, with a voice like a cheese grater and opinions on everything. Together they'd sit in my living room. My living room. Whispering and glancing my way like I was furniture that hadn't been moved in too long. I kept mental notes. Old habit from my auditing days. Every suspicious interaction, every odd comment, every number that didn't quite add up. I wrote nothing down, too risky with them watching. But I remembered everything. Then came Thanksgiving. The dining room was full. Peggy and her husband, some friends. Everyone gathered around a table loaded with food. My turkey, my home. Vanessa had arranged everything, seating herself at the head of the table. My spot. But I said nothing. The wine flowed, Laughter filled the room. I watched my son, who was drinking faster than usual, avoiding my gaze like it might burn him. Then Vanessa stood up, crystal glass in hand, tapping it with a fork. "Everyone, I have wonderful news to share." The room quieted. She smiled, that perfect practice smile, and looked directly at me. "As of this week, I'm officially managing all of this household's finances. Dad's accounts have been frozen for his own safety and security. He agreed it would be best this way. I just want everyone to know that we're taking care of him." She raised her glass. "To family." They applauded. Every single person at that table clapped like trained seals. Peggy beamed with pride. Derek stared at his plate, his fork motionless. I didn't applaud. I sat perfectly still, watching my daughter-in-law bask in her moment of triumph. Frozen. My accounts were frozen. For my safety. The thing about working for the IRS is that you learn to control your face. I've sat across from men who stole millions, smiled at them, made small talk, all while building a case that would put them away for years. So I smiled now, nodded slightly, played the confused old man they expected me to be, but inside, something cold and sharp was taking shape. Not anger. Anger makes you stupid. This was recognition. I knew exactly what was happening. After dinner, while everyone mingled in the living room, I noticed a document on the side table near the entrance. Legal-looking, official, power of attorney. My name, my address, my signature, except I had never signed it. I'd never even seen this document before. I looked up slowly. Derek was watching me from across the room, his face pale as chalk, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. When our eyes met, he looked away immediately. My son knew. He knew what his wife was doing, and he said nothing. I set the document down carefully, exactly where I'd found it, walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and stood at the window, looking out at the backyard where I'd taught my son to ride a bike. She thought she was dealing with a helpless old man. She had no idea what she'd just started. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, running numbers in my head. 3 years of consolidated accounts. 3 years of documents I'd signed without reading carefully enough, or hadn't signed at all. 3 years of Vanessa's sweet smile and helpful suggestions. How much had she taken? How deep did this go? The next morning, I waited until the house was quiet. Derek had left for work early, avoiding breakfast with me. Vanessa was in the master bedroom, my former master bedroom, the one I'd shared with my wife for 35 years, doing whatever she did all day. I walked down to the basement. Old houses have secrets. Mine has a safe behind a false panel in the workshop area, hidden behind my workbench where I restore antique clocks. It's a hobby that requires patience and precision. You can't rush a 100-year-old mechanism. Also, it means I spend hours alone in the basement, and nobody thinks twice about it. I'd installed that safe 20 years ago. Inside, copies of every important document I'd ever signed, birth certificates, property deeds, tax records, and signature samples spanning decades. Old auditor's paranoia? Maybe. But paranoia is just pattern recognition that hasn't been proven right yet. I pulled out my signature samples and compared them to a photograph I'd taken of that power of attorney document. The forgery was good, very good, but the K was wrong. My K has a distinctive backward lean, a quirk from my 20s. This K stood straight up, textbook perfect. Nobody forges a signature by making it too neat. But Vanessa didn't know that. I photographed everything, saved images to a secure cloud account she didn't know existed. Then I put everything back exactly as it was. I remembered the day Vanessa moved in 3 years ago. She'd arrived with Derek, carrying boxes. I was in the living room with my wife's piano. We'd kept it even though neither of us played. "Oh, that's beautiful," Vanessa had said, running her fingers along the ivory keys. "Do you play, Harold?" "No. My wife was going to learn." "How sweet. You know, I took lessons as a girl. Maybe I could play for you sometime?" She never did. Within 6 months, the piano was in the garage. Within a year, she suggested selling it. I refused. Her face when I said no, just for a moment, before the mask slipped back into place. I should have paid more attention to that look. Cold, calculating. The look of someone recalculating an equation after getting an unexpected variable. Around noon, Vanessa appeared in the kitchen where I was making a sandwich. Good morning, Dad. She was chipper, radiant, as if last night's announcement was perfectly normal. How are you feeling today? Sleep well? Fine, thank you. Good, good. Can I make you some tea? You look a little tired. I'm fine. She studied me for a moment, her head tilted slightly, like a bird examining a worm. You know, what I said last night about managing things, it really is for the best. Derek and I just want to make sure you're not stressed about finances. You've earned a rest. I smiled at her, the same smile I'd given to a man who embezzled $4 million from a children's hospital. That's very thoughtful, Vanessa. We're family, she said. That's what family does? Family. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. I nodded and took my sandwich upstairs. Locked the door. Then I opened my laptop and began searching. Elder Financial Abuse Attorney, Nashville. Tennessee Adult Protection Act lawyer. Financial exploitation elderly adults, legal help. The results were illuminating. Tennessee takes elder abuse seriously. Financial exploitation of adults over 65 is a felony. Forgery is a Class C felony, carrying up to 6 years in prison. If I could prove what she'd done, Vanessa wouldn't just lose access to my accounts. She'd lose her freedom. I found him on page 2. Gerald Martinez, attorney at law, specialized in elder abuse. 200 reviews, 4.8 stars. Not a single lost case of this type in 5 years. I scheduled a consultation for the following week, using a library computer and a credit card Vanessa didn't know about. That evening, I heard Peggy's voice from downstairs. She was on the phone, her grating tone carrying through the old house's thin walls. Honestly, it's getting worse. Poor Harold forgot what day it was yesterday. Asked me twice if it was Sunday. Derek is worried about him, naturally. We all are. It might be time to discuss options, you know, for his own good. I hadn't forgotten anything. I'd asked her about Sunday because that's when she'd said she was leaving, and I was hoping it was true. But there it was, the groundwork being laid, the narrative being constructed. Confused old Harold, forgetting things, needing supervision, needing someone to manage his affairs. They weren't just stealing from me. They were building a case to declare me incompetent. I sat surrounded by antique clocks I'd restored over the years, each one a puzzle I'd solved. Patience and precision. Find the broken gear. Fix it. This wasn't so different, just a more dangerous mechanism. I thought about Derek, my son, who couldn't meet my eyes, who drank too much at dinner, who let his wife stand up in my house and announce she'd taken control of my life. When did I lose him? The questions wouldn't help me now. What's done is done. What matters is what comes next. Later that night, I went to empty the hallway trash can. At the bottom, under crumpled tissues, an envelope from First Tennessee Bank, addressed to me, already opened. They were intercepting my mail now. I stood there in the dim hallway, holding that torn envelope, and felt something shift inside me. The last traces of doubt disappeared. This was war, and Vanessa had no idea she'd just declared it on someone who'd spent 30 years learning exactly how to win. The consultation with Gerald Martinez was scheduled for the following week. Getting there without Vanessa knowing would be the first test. I'd been watching her more carefully since Thanksgiving. Once you know someone's a predator, you start noticing the small tells, the micro-expressions, the calculated pauses, the way her eyes tracked valuable objects in rooms like a cat tracking mice. The morning of my appointment, I announced at breakfast that I was going to the library. The library? Vanessa looked up from her phone, eyebrows raised. What for? Research. I've been thinking about writing my memoirs. 30 years at the IRS. There are stories I could tell. I took a sip of coffee. Probably boring to most people, but it keeps an old man's mind sharp. She smiled, but I caught the flicker of annoyance. Another unexpected variable in her equation. That's nice, Dad. Derek, isn't that nice? Derek grunted something into his cereal bowl. He'd barely looked at me since Thanksgiving. I walked to the library, 3 blocks, then ordered an Uber from there. Gerald Martinez's office was downtown on Church Street, in one of those glass towers that house lawyers, accountants, and other professionals who make their living untangling other people's messes. Martinez was younger than I expected, 55 maybe, dark suit, firm handshake, eyes that assessed me quickly and efficiently. His office walls were covered with framed certificates, and a few newspaper clippings about cases he'd won. "Mr. Kennedy, please sit down. You mentioned elder financial abuse on the phone." I sat, pulled out my phone, showed him the photographs of the power of attorney. "This document appeared at my Thanksgiving dinner. My daughter-in-law announced to a room full of guests that she now controls my finances. That's my name on this paper. That's supposedly my signature." I paused. I never signed it. Martinez studied the image, zooming in on the signature. "You're certain?" "I was a senior auditor for the IRS for 30 years. I've examined thousands of signatures. This one's a forgery. Good, but not good enough. Look at the K." He looked. Then he looked at me with new interest. "The K leans wrong," he said slowly. "Yours tilts backward." "Exactly. Whoever forged this used a textbook example of the letter. They didn't know about my quirk." Martinez set down the phone. "Mr. Kennedy, if this is what you say it is, we're looking at felony forgery. In Tennessee, that's a Class C felony, up to 6 years. If she's been using this document to access your finances, that's financial exploitation of an elderly adult, also a felony. I suspected as much. But I have to be honest with you. Suspicion isn't proof. We need documentation. Bank records, transaction histories, a forensic analysis of this signature by a certified expert." He leaned back. "Do you have access to your financial records?" "She's intercepting my mail, but I have other resources." I told him about the safe, the copies I'd kept, the photographs stored in the cloud. Martinez nodded slowly. "You're not what I expected, Mr. Kennedy. Most people underestimate old men. It's a useful quality." He almost smiled. "I'm going to recommend someone, a private investigator named Rachel Thompson. She specializes in financial fraud cases. Discreet, thorough, and she knows how to gather evidence that holds up in court." He wrote a name and number on a card. "In the meantime, don't confront them. Don't let them know you suspect anything." "Can you do that?" "I've been playing a role for 3 years without knowing it. Playing one intentionally shouldn't be any harder." I paid him $2,500 cash, money from the emergency fund in my safe that Vanessa didn't know existed. He didn't ask where it came from. Professional discretion. The Uber ride back cost $34. I had the driver drop me 2 blocks from home so I could approach on foot, as if I'd walked from the library. Vanessa was waiting in the living room when I came through the door. "How was the library?" "Educational." I hung up my coat. "Found some interesting material on memoir structure. Did you know most successful memoirs start with a dramatic incident? Something that hooks the reader." "Fascinating." She was watching me too closely. "You were gone a long time." Old men walked slowly, and the library had comfortable chairs. I started toward the stairs. "I think I'll rest before dinner." "Dad?" I turned. She was holding something, a small slip of paper. "I was doing laundry earlier. Found this in your jacket pocket." She held it up. "An Uber receipt. $34 is a long way from the library." The air in the room changed. I could feel her calculating, reassessing, trying to figure out what move I'd made that she hadn't anticipated. I kept my face pleasant, mildly confused, the befuddled old man she expected. "Uber? I don't know what that is. Must be from before. Maybe Derek left something in my pocket." "This jacket is yours, Dad. I recognize it." "Then I don't know. These things happen when you're my age." I shrugged and turned back toward the stairs. Memory isn't what it used to be. I felt her eyes on my back all the way up. She wasn't sure. Not yet. But the first crack had appeared in her perfect plan. The weeks between Thanksgiving and Christmas passed in a strange, suspended tension. On the surface, nothing had changed. Vanessa still smiled her sweet smile. Derek still avoided my eyes. Peggy still called weekly to check on poor Harold's memory. But underneath, everything was shifting. I'd hired Rachel Thompson the day after meeting Martinez. She was 34, sharp-featured, with the kind of direct gaze that made you want to tell the truth, whether you meant to or not. We met at a diner across town. Neutral territory, no paper trail. "I need you to find out everything about Vanessa Kennedy," I told her. "Maiden name Price. Claims to be a financial consultant." "What kind of everything?" "Professional history. Client list. Any complaints, lawsuits, or criminal investigations. I want to know everyone she's worked with and what happened to them." Rachel wrote nothing down, just listened, nodded, and named her fee. I paid her $1,500 as a retainer. "Mr. Kennedy," she said before we parted, "in my experience, people who steal from family usually have practice. If she's doing this to you, you're probably not the first." "That's exactly what I'm counting on." Meanwhile, I played my part. The confused, compliant father-in-law who shuffled around his own house like a guest. Every morning, Vanessa would check on me with that saccharine voice. "Sleep well, Dad? Need anything?" Every evening, I'd retreat to my room early, claiming fatigue. What she didn't know was that I was watching, cataloging, building a case in my head. I noticed how she always positioned herself between me and the mailbox, how she'd suddenly appear whenever I was near the computer, how she'd steered Derek away from private conversations with me. Christmas arrived with all its false cheer. Vanessa had decorated the house, my house, with expensive ornaments and a tree that must have cost $300, paid for with my money, no doubt. She'd invited Peggy and a few of their friends for dinner, recreating the Thanksgiving dynamic. The gifts under the tree were wrapped in gold paper. When we opened them, I received practical items: socks, a sweater, a book about staying mentally active in your golden years. Subtle. Vanessa received jewelry. Derek got new golf clubs. I did the math. The jewelry alone was probably $2,000. Money she'd taken from me, transformed into a gift for herself. There was an elegant irony there, if you had the stomach for it. After dinner, I watched Derek. He was drinking again, not falling down drunk, but steadily, methodically, the way a man drinks when he's trying to drown something. His hands shook slightly when he poured. He laughed too loudly at Vanessa's jokes, agreed too quickly with her opinions. My son was afraid of his own wife. When the guests finally left and Peggy had gone to the guest room, I found Derek alone in the kitchen, loading the dishwasher. I approached quietly, stood beside him. "Son?" He flinched, actually flinched like I'd raised a hand to him. "Dad, I didn't hear you come in." "Derek." I leaned closer, lowered my voice to barely a whisper. "Tell me something. Are you truly blind to all of this?" He went white, not pale. White like someone had drained the blood from his face. Sweat broke out on his forehead. His hands stopped moving. "Blind to what?" The words came out strangled. Before I could answer, Vanessa's voice cut through from the doorway. "Blind to what?" She stood there, dish towel in hand, eyes sharp as broken glass. She'd been listening. Of course she'd been listening. I turned to face her, smiled my gentle old man smile. To what a wonderful evening this was, Vanessa. The food, the company, the decorations. You really outdid yourself. It's been years since this house felt so festive. She didn't buy it. I could see the suspicion crystallizing behind her eyes. But she couldn't call me out without revealing her own paranoia. "Well," she said slowly, "we try to make things special. Family is what matters." "Indeed it is?" Derek had resumed loading the dishwasher, his movements mechanical, his face still ashen. He knew something was happening. He just didn't know what. I excused myself and went to my room. On my phone, secure in my locked bedroom, I found an email from Rachel Thompson. The first report. I read it 3 times. Vanessa Price had no license as a financial consultant. She'd never had one. She'd advised at least 3 elderly clients over the past decade, all widowers or widows, all with significant assets, all of whom had filed complaints that were later withdrawn or dismissed for insufficient evidence. The 3rd client's name jumped out at me. Edward Holloway, 73 years old, widower, died 6 months after Vanessa began managing his finances. Cause of death, heart failure. His estate had been nearly depleted by the time of his death. I set down the phone. She wasn't just a thief. She was a predator, a professional, and I was her latest target. The question was no longer whether to fight back. The question was how to make sure she never did this to anyone again. The new year arrived without celebration. Vanessa had organized a small gathering, just her, Derek, Peggy, and myself, and we'd watch the ball drop on television while drinking champagne that cost $60 a bottle. My money, naturally. I toasted to new beginnings and watched Vanessa's eyes narrow slightly. She was still trying to figure out what I knew, what I was planning. The uncertainty was eating at her, making her sloppy. Good. A week into the new year, Rachel Thompson sent her second report. This one was more detailed, and more damning than I'd expected. She'd obtained copies of my bank statements through methods I didn't ask about. Some things are better left unquestioned when you're building a case. The numbers told a clear story. Over the past 18 months, $47,300 had disappeared from my accounts. The breakdown was almost artistic in its audacity. $12,000 for kitchen renovation. I looked at my kitchen every morning. Same cabinets, same countertops, same flooring as when my wife and I installed them 15 years ago. Not a single nail had been hammered. $8,500 for medical expenses. My health insurance covered everything. I hadn't paid a medical bill out of pocket in years. Every doctor visit, every prescription, every checkup, covered. $15,800 in direct transfers to an account, registered to Vanessa Kennedy. Financial management fees, the memo lines read. For managing money she was simultaneously stealing. $11,000 in cash withdrawals. No explanation needed. Cash is untraceable. That's why criminals love it. I sat in my basement workshop, surrounded by the quiet ticking of restored clocks, and read the numbers again. $47,300. Enough to buy a new car. Enough for someone's college tuition. Enough to live on for a year if you were careful. Gone. Taken by a woman who smiled at me every morning and asked if I'd slept well. The rage I felt was cold and focused, not the hot, blinding kind that makes you do stupid things. This was the rage of an auditor who'd found fraud. Methodical, patient, building toward a reckoning. But Vanessa wasn't standing still either. 2 weeks later, a woman appeared at our door. Professional attire, clipboard, friendly but assessing smile. Mr. Kennedy? I'm Sandra Walsh, from Adult Protective Services. I'm here to conduct a welfare assessment. Vanessa appeared behind me, her face a portrait of concern. Sandra, thank you so much for coming. We've been so worried about Dad lately. I let them in. Let Sandra sit me down in my own living room while Peggy, who'd arrived, coincidentally that morning, hovered nearby, shaking her head sadly and making little tutting sounds. Mr. Kennedy, Sandra began, your family has expressed concerns about your cognitive state, specifically memory issues, confusion about dates and times, difficulty managing daily tasks. I looked at Vanessa. She had arranged her features into an expression of loving worry. It was masterful, really. Academy Award material. I see, I said. And what would you like to know? For the next hour, Sandra asked questions. What day was it? Who was the current president? Could I count backward from 100 by sevens? Did I know my address, my social security number, the names of my relatives? I answered every question correctly. I recited my medication list, which Vanessa had been managing, from memory, including dosages and timing. I described my daily routine in detail. I solved a simple logic puzzle she presented without hesitation. When she asked about my career, I told her, 30 years with the IRS, senior auditor, hundreds of cases involving financial fraud and tax evasion. Sandra's pen paused over her clipboard. She looked at Vanessa with a different expression now, more skeptical, more questioning. Mr. Kennedy, she said carefully, based on this assessment, I find you to be fully mentally competent, clear cognition, excellent memory, no signs of confusion or disorientation. Vanessa's smile froze in place. Just for a moment, barely a flicker, but I caught it. The rage behind her eyes quickly smothered. That's wonderful news, she said, voice tight. We were just so worried. Better safe than sorry, right? After Sandra left, Vanessa disappeared into the master bedroom and didn't emerge for hours. I could hear her voice through the walls. On the phone with her lawyer, probably, or her sister, trying to figure out her next move. The following week, I met with Martinez at his office. He'd received Rachel's full report. Mr. Kennedy, we have enough for a civil lawsuit. Financial exploitation, breach of fiduciary duty, fraud. We can file tomorrow, if you want. And criminal charges? He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. That's trickier. For the district attorney to take this seriously, we need documented evidence of ongoing criminal activity. Something they can't dismiss as a family dispute. He paused. What we have proves she took your money. What we need is proof she's still trying. I understood. The past wasn't enough. We needed her to show her true colors in real time, on camera, on paper, in a way that couldn't be denied. I said slowly, I have an idea. The trap was elegant in its simplicity. The best ones always are. 2 weeks after my meeting with Martinez, I opened a new bank account at Regions Bank, different from First Tennessee, where Vanessa had established her control. I deposited $3,000, drawn from cash I'd kept hidden in my basement safe, for exactly this kind of emergency. Then I did something careless, something an old man with failing memory might do. I left the account statement on the kitchen counter, just for a few minutes, just long enough for Vanessa to walk through on her way to the laundry room. I watched from the doorway, pretending to be absorbed in the newspaper as her eyes caught the paper. Watched them widen slightly as she read the bank's name, the account number, the balance, $3,000, sitting in an account she hadn't known about, money that wasn't under her control. She didn't say anything, just walked past, collected her laundry basket, and continued on, like nothing had happened. But I saw her hands tighten on the basket's handles until her knuckles went white, saw the calculation happening behind her eyes. For someone like Vanessa, that was intolerable. An asset she didn't control was an asset she couldn't steal. I went back to my routine, puttering in the basement with my clocks, pretending to nap in my chair, shuffling around the house like the harmless old man she believed me to be. And I waited. Exactly 8 days later, I received a letter from Regions Bank. Dear Mr. Kennedy, it read, we are writing to inform you of an attempted unauthorized access to your account. An individual identifying themselves as your representative attempted to obtain information about your account using documentation that could not be verified. Per our security protocols, no information was released, and this incident has been logged. Please contact our fraud department at your earliest convenience. I read the letter 3 times. Then I sat back in my chair and smiled. She'd taken the bait, walked right into the trap like a hungry fish snapping at a worm, tried to access an account she had no right to, using forged documents that didn't pass the bank's verification. And now there was a documented record of it, a federal offense, bank fraud, identity theft, the kind of evidence that makes prosecutors sit up and pay attention. I drove to Martinez's office that afternoon, taking an Uber from the library as usual, handed him the letter without a word. He read it, then he looked up at me with something close to admiration. Mr. Kennedy, did you plan this? I may have anticipated certain behaviors. He shook his head slowly. This is federal. Bank fraud, attempted identity theft. Combined with the state charges for financial exploitation and forgery, she's looking at serious prison time. How serious? If we present all of this together, 10 to 15 years, depending on the judge and how much additional evidence surfaces. And, Mr. Kennedy, in my experience, people like her always have more victims. I nodded. The number didn't bring me joy, but it brought something close to satisfaction. Justice isn't always pleasant, but it's necessary. That evening, I met Derek at a coffee shop across town. He'd sent me a text that morning. Dad, can we talk? Alone? Please? And I'd agreed despite my reservations. He looked terrible. Bags under his eyes like he hadn't slept in weeks. Hands shaking slightly as he wrapped them around his coffee cup. He'd lost weight since Christmas, his clothes hanging loose on his frame. Dad, his voice cracked. I need to tell you something. I'm listening. I knew? He couldn't meet my eyes. About some of it. Vanessa said she was just optimizing things, making sure your money was being managed properly for your benefit. She said you'd agreed to it, that you just didn't remember because of your age. And you believed her? I wanted to. His voice was barely a whisper. It was easier to believe her than to think my wife was. He trailed off, unable to say the word. Stealing from your father? He flinched like I'd struck him across the face. I didn't know how much. I swear to you, Dad, I didn't know about the amounts or the forged signature or any of the specific details. But I knew something wasn't right, and I didn't ask questions because I was afraid of the answers. Because asking would have meant admitting my marriage was a lie. I studied my son, the boy who'd gripped my hand so tightly learning to ride a bike. The man who'd let his wife take control of his life, his decisions, his spine. Derek, what you did, what you allowed to happen, I'm not sure I can forgive it. Not yet. Maybe not ever. He nodded, tears forming in his eyes and spilling down his cheeks. But you're here now. That counts for something. I leaned forward. The question is, what are you going to do about it? I don't know. I'm scared of her, Dad. You don't know what she's like when she's angry. The things she says, the way she looks at me. Oh, I think I'm about to find out. I paused. She's planning something for my birthday, isn't she? Derek went pale, his coffee cup frozen halfway to his lips. How did you know? Because that's what predators do. They escalate. They push for more when they feel their control slipping. I held his gaze until he looked away. Tell me what she's planning. He swallowed hard. A trust document. Something that would transfer the house to her and me after you pass. She says it's just estate planning, but there's a clause about if you're declared incompetent. All assets transfer to her control immediately. Yes, his voice was hollow. Dad, whatever you do, don't sign anything. Not on your birthday, not ever. I reached across the table and placed my hand on his arm. Son, I have no intention of signing anything. I squeezed once, then let go. But I think it's time Vanessa learned that this old man still has a few surprises left. My 69th birthday arrived on a cool mid-March morning, the kind of day that starts with pale sunshine and the promise of spring after a long winter. Vanessa had been planning something for weeks. I'd caught glimpses, hushed phone calls, a new dress hanging in the closet, an appointment written in her calendar for lawyer, 2 p.m. Derek's warning echoed in my mind. Don't sign anything. That evening, the dining room was decorated with balloons and a banner that read, Happy Birthday, Dad. The irony wasn't lost on me. 3 months ago at this same table, she'd announced she was freezing my accounts. Now she was celebrating me. But this wasn't a celebration. This was an ambush. Vanessa had invited Peggy and her husband, and a man I didn't recognize. Middle-aged, expensive suit, briefcase. He introduced himself as Lawrence Whitmore, an estate attorney. I thought it would be nice to have a family dinner, Vanessa said, her smile bright and brittle. And since we're all together, I had an idea for a birthday present. Something practical. She nodded to Whitmore, who opened his briefcase and produced a stack of documents. The top page read, Revocable Living Trust Agreement. This is something Derek and I have been discussing, Vanessa continued. A way to simplify things for the future. It ensures the house and your other assets transfer smoothly to family, without the hassle of probate. She slid the document toward me with a pen. I didn't touch either. That's very thoughtful, I said slowly. May I read it first? Of course. Her smile didn't waver. Take your time. So I did. I read every page, out loud, pausing to ask Whitmore questions about specific clauses. His answers were professional, but guarded. I reached page 7. Section 4.2. Incapacity Provisions. This is interesting, I said, keeping my voice casual. It says here that in the event I'm deemed mentally incapacitated, all assets immediately transfer to, let me see, Vanessa Kennedy as sole trustee. I looked up. Not Derek, just Vanessa. The room went quiet. That's standard language, Whitmore said quickly. It's just a safeguard that would let her control everything the moment a doctor signs a paper saying I'm confused. I set down the document. Tell me, Mr. Whitmore, did Vanessa mention that she already tried to have me declared incompetent? Or that a social worker found me fully mentally competent just 2 months ago? Whitmore's professional composure cracked slightly. He glanced at Vanessa. Dad, Vanessa's voice had lost its honey. This is just estate planning. There's no need to be paranoid. I appreciate the concern for my estate, Vanessa, but I'll have to decline. I pushed the document back across the table. My attorney has advised me not to sign anything without his review. Your attorney? Her eyes narrowed. What attorney? Gerald Martinez. Specializes in elder law and financial crimes. Perhaps you've heard of him? I watched her face go through several emotions in rapid succession. Confusion, calculation, and finally, a flicker of something that looked very much like fear. I didn't know you had an attorney, she said carefully. There are many things you don't know about me, Vanessa. I smiled. For instance, you don't know that I've been keeping detailed records of every financial transaction in this household for the past 3 years. You don't know that I have copies of documents you thought were safely filed away. And you don't know that tomorrow morning a civil lawsuit will be filed against you in Davidson County Court. The color drained from her face. Actually drained. I could see it happening, like watching water flow out of a sink. Her hands gripped the edge of the table. What are you talking about? $87,300. That's the amount my forensic accountant has documented as misappropriated from my accounts over the past 18 months, plus interest and legal fees. I paused. I suppose I should thank you for the birthday party. It's given me a chance to serve you notice in person. Derek sat frozen in his chair, looking like he might be sick. Peggy's mouth hung open. Whitmore was already packing his briefcase, clearly wanting no part of whatever was happening. Vanessa recovered faster than I expected. Her face hardened into something cold and determined. You're delusional, she said, her voice flat. This is exactly what I was afraid of. Your mind is going, and you're lashing out at the people trying to help you. We'll let the court decide whose mind is going. I stood up from the table. Thank you for the birthday dinner, Vanessa. It's been memorable. I walked up to my room, leaving chaos behind me. Through the floor, I could hear Vanessa's voice rising, demanding explanations, making accusations. Derek's voice, pleading. The lawsuit was already filed. Martinez had delivered the papers that afternoon. By morning, Vanessa Kennedy would officially be a defendant. The next day, I watched from my window as the mail carrier approached, watched Vanessa intercept the mail, as she always did, watched her open an envelope addressed to her. Even from a distance, I could see her hands shake as she read. The counterattack came faster than I expected. Within a week of receiving the lawsuit, Vanessa had hired her own attorney, a man named Victor Sloan, who had a reputation for aggressive tactics and questionable ethics. They filed a response that made my blood boil when Martinez showed it to me. She's claiming harassment, Martinez said, flipping through the pages. Says you've been creating a hostile living environment, following her around the house, making threatening comments, deliberately trying to provoke her. I've barely spoken to her in weeks. She's also filed a motion to have you declared mentally incompetent. He pulled out another document. She's using Peggy as her primary witness. Statements about your confusion, your memory lapses, your irrational behavior. That social worker already determined I was competent. She's arguing that was months ago and your condition has deteriorated rapidly. Martinez looked at me over the papers. Mr. Kennedy, I need to be honest with you. This is going to get ugly before it gets better. He was right. The competency hearing was scheduled for early April. I spent 2 days being examined by court-appointed psychologists and geriatric specialists. They asked me questions, gave me puzzles to solve, watched me walk and talk and remember. In the end, their report was unequivocal. Harold Kennedy showed no signs of cognitive impairment. His memory was excellent. His reasoning was sound. He was fully capable of managing his own affairs. The judge dismissed Vanessa's motion for incompetency in less than 15 minutes. I watched her face as he read the ruling. The mask she'd worn so carefully for years was cracking. Her jaw tightened. Her fingers clenched and unclenched. When she looked at me, there was pure hatred in her eyes. But Vanessa wasn't finished. If she couldn't win in court, she'd try to win in public opinion. 2 weeks after the hearing, I received a phone call from a man named Thomas Bradley, a reporter from a local Nashville newspaper. Mr. Kennedy, I'm writing a story about elder abuse in families. Your daughter-in-law reached out to us with some interesting claims. What kind of claims? She says you've been terrorizing her, that you've become paranoid and aggressive, and that she and your son have been living in fear. She's painting herself as the victim of an elderly father-in-law who's lost his grip on reality. I laughed. I couldn't help it. Mr. Bradley, did she happen to mention that I spent 30 years as a senior auditor for the IRS? That my entire career was built on catching people who lie for money? There was a pause. No, she didn't mention that. Did she mention the lawsuit I've filed against her for financial exploitation? Or the forged power of attorney? Or the $47,000 that's disappeared from my accounts? Another pause, longer this time. No. I'll tell you what, Mr. Bradley. If you're interested in a story about elder abuse, I've got one for you. But the abuser isn't who you think it is. We talked for over an hour. I told him everything. The Thanksgiving announcement, the forged signature, the bank trap, the lawsuit. I gave him Rachel Thompson's contact information and Martinez's office number. I told him about Edward Holloway, the elderly man who died after Vanessa managed his finances. When I finished, there was a long silence. "Mr. Kennedy," Bradley said finally, "would you be willing to go on the record with all of this?" I've been waiting for someone to ask. The story didn't run immediately. Bradley was a good journalist. He wanted to verify everything, talk to other sources, build a complete picture. But he called me 3 weeks later with news that changed everything. "I found 2 more people," he said. "2 more elderly clients Vanessa worked with before she married your son. Both of them lost significant money. Both were told it was investment losses or management fees. Both were too embarrassed to press charges. Are they willing to talk?" "One is. Martha Greenwood, 78 years old. Lost over $60,000. She thought she was the only one. When I told her about you and the others, she started crying." He paused. "The other is Robert Daniels, 69. He lost nearly $80,000. His daughter convinced him to speak to me." 3 victims, 3 separate cases, a pattern of behavior spanning almost a decade. Vanessa wasn't just a thief. She was a serial predator who'd made a career out of stealing from the elderly. I called Martinez that evening. "We need to talk to the district attorney," I said. "This isn't just a civil matter anymore." "Already on it," he replied. "I've been in touch with the DA's office. With multiple victims willing to testify and documented evidence of ongoing fraud, they're interested. Very interested. The investigation would take time. Building a criminal case is slower than building a civil one. But the wheels were turning, and Vanessa still had no idea how bad it was about to get. The case against Vanessa built faster than I'd expected. Thomas Bradley's article ran in early May, and within a week, 2 more victims had come forward. Martha Greenwood, 78, had lost $62,000 over 2 years. Robert Daniels, 69, and confined to a wheelchair after a stroke, had lost nearly $80,000. Both of them had the same story. Vanessa had been charming, helpful, trustworthy, until she wasn't. The Tennessee District Attorney's Office opened a formal investigation. Detectives interviewed all 3 of us, reviewed bank records, traced money transfers across multiple accounts and institutions. Rachel Thompson's work proved invaluable. She'd already documented the patterns that prosecutors needed to see, saved them weeks of investigation. By late May, the DA was ready to move forward with criminal charges. But before that could happen, I had one more card to play. Martinez had worked out an arrangement with the prosecutor's office. If Derek agreed to testify against his wife, providing inside knowledge about the schemes, the forgeries, the planned escalation, he would receive immunity from prosecution for any role he'd played. It wasn't a free pass. He'd still have to face me, and that was its own kind of punishment. But it would keep him out of prison. I met my son at the same coffee shop where we'd talked before. This time, he looked different. Still exhausted, still haunted by what he'd allowed to happen. But there was something new in his eyes. Determination, maybe. Or the first stirrings of courage he should have shown years ago. "They want me to testify," he said, wrapping his hands around a coffee cup that had gone cold. Martinez called. Said if I cooperate fully, I won't be charged. I know. I suggested it. He looked at me, surprise breaking through his exhaustion. "You did?" "You're my son, Derek. I'm furious at you, and I'm not sure I'll ever fully trust you again. But you're still my son." I paused, letting the weight of that settle. "The question is, are you ready to tell the truth? All of it? No more hiding, no more pretending you didn't see what was happening?" He was quiet for a long moment. The coffee shop hummed around us. Conversations, the hiss of an espresso machine, normal life continuing while ours hung in the balance. Then he nodded. "I knew about the power of attorney. I knew the signature was forged. She practiced it at our kitchen table, night after night, and I pretended I didn't see. I knew she was moving money around, taking more than she should have, creating false expenses." His voice cracked. "I knew, Dad, and I didn't stop her because I was weak, because she made me feel like I was nothing without her, like I couldn't survive on my own. And now? Now I want to make it right, whatever it takes." 2 days later, Derek gave his formal statement to the district attorney. He confessed everything: the forged documents, the systematic financial manipulation, the long-term plan to eventually declare me incompetent and seize the house. He also revealed something I hadn't known. Peggy had been actively involved from the beginning, making phone calls to set up the fake social worker visit, spreading rumors about my memory problems to build a paper trail for the incompetency claim. The arrest warrants were issued that same afternoon. I wasn't there when they took Vanessa. I heard about it later from Martinez, who'd gotten details from contacts in the police department. 2 officers arrived at the house, my house, around 4 o'clock on a Tuesday. Vanessa answered the door in her yoga clothes, probably expecting a package delivery. According to Martinez, she didn't believe it at first, kept insisting there had been a mistake, demanding to call her lawyer, threatening to sue everyone involved for harassment. It wasn't until the handcuffs clicked shut around her wrists that the reality finally hit her. Peggy was arrested at her own home an hour later. She went quietly, apparently too shocked to resist. The bail hearing was held the next morning. I attended, sitting in the back of the courtroom with Martinez beside me, watching the woman who'd tried to steal my life-saving stand before a judge in an orange jumpsuit. The prosecutor laid out the charges: financial exploitation of 3 elderly adults, felony forgery, bank fraud, identity theft, conspiracy. Total documented losses exceeding $180,000. Bail was set at $250,000. Vanessa's face went gray when she heard the number. She didn't have that kind of money. Not anymore. Her assets had been frozen pending the investigation. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. As the bailiff moved to escort her out, Vanessa spotted Derek in the courtroom. Their eyes met across the room. Whatever composure she'd maintained shattered completely. "You!" She lunged toward the railing, guards grabbing her arms. "You did this. You betrayed me. After everything I did for us, everything I sacrificed." Derek stood his ground, pale, shaking but standing. "You ruined everything!" Vanessa screamed. Her voice echoed off the courtroom walls. "I will make you pay for this. Do you hear me? I will destroy you." The guards dragged her toward the door. She twisted in their grip, her eyes wild, finally finding me in the back row. "And you," she spat the words like poison, "you think you've won, old man? This isn't over. This will never be over." I met her gaze calmly, didn't flinch, didn't look away. "Actually, Vanessa," I said quietly, "I think it is." The door closed behind her. The courtroom fell silent. Derek walked over to where I sat. His hands were trembling. "Dad," his voice broke, "I'm so sorry. For all of it." I looked at my son, the boy who'd let me down, the man who'd finally found his spine. "I know you are, son. I know." The trial lasted 3 weeks. By the end, there was no doubt about the outcome. The prosecution presented a devastating case. Bank records showed systematic theft over nearly a decade, across multiple victims. Expert witnesses testified about the forged signatures, demonstrating how they differed from my authentic signature. Martha Greenwood broke down on the stand, describing how Vanessa had befriended her at church, offered to help manage her investments, and slowly drained her life savings while smiling at her every Sunday. Robert Daniels gave his testimony from a wheelchair, his voice steady despite the emotion visible on his face. His daughter sat behind him, tears streaming down her cheeks as he described losing $80,000, money he'd saved for his grandchildren's education. And Derek testified. He answered every question the prosecutor asked, admitted every failure and every moment of willful blindness, held nothing back. When the defense attorney tried to paint him as unreliable, Derek looked directly at the jury and said, "I was a coward who let my wife steal from my father. I'm done being a coward." It was, in its way, the bravest thing I'd ever seen him do. Vanessa's defense tried every angle. They claimed she was simply a poor financial manager, not a criminal. They suggested her victims were confused, unreliable, perhaps suffering from memory issues themselves. They argued that Derek's testimony was tainted by his own guilt, that he was trying to save himself by sacrificing his wife. None of it worked. The evidence was too clear, the pattern too obvious. When the verdict came, guilty on all counts, Vanessa sat motionless at the defense table. Her face was blank, empty, like someone had switched off a light behind her eyes. The confident woman who'd once controlled every room she entered had finally run out of moves. Then came the sentencing. The judge, a stern woman named Patricia Morrison, reviewed Vanessa's history. No prior convictions, but 3 documented patterns of elderly financial exploitation. Combined losses exceeding $230,000. Mrs. Kennedy, the judge said, looking directly at Vanessa, what you've done represents a fundamental betrayal of trust. You targeted vulnerable people, elderly individuals who believed you were helping them, and you systematically stole from them. This was not a mistake. This was a calculated, ongoing pattern of predatory behavior. Vanessa stared straight ahead, expression frozen, offering no response. For the charge of financial exploitation of elderly adults, I sentence you to 6 years. For forgery, 3 years to be served consecutively. For bank fraud, 2 years concurrent. She paused to let the numbers sink in. Total sentence, 8 years, with eligibility for parole after 4 years served. Additionally, you are ordered to pay full restitution totaling $232,000. Vanessa's shoulders slumped forward. Her head dropped. The polished, confident woman who'd announced at my Thanksgiving table that she was in control of my finances, she was gone. In her place sat someone small, defeated, broken by the weight of her own crimes, finally catching up to her. Peggy, charged as an accessory, received 2 years probation and 500 hours of community service. She'd cooperated once she realized how deep her sister's schemes ran. After the sentencing, I stood outside the courthouse with Derek. The late summer sun was warm on my face. Birds sang in the trees lining the street. Life continued, even after everything. What happens now? Derek asked quietly. Now we move forward. I looked at him. I'm selling the house. He blinked in surprise. What? Too many memories, not all of them good. I shrugged. I'm thinking about a condo downtown, near the restaurants I like. Somewhere without a master bedroom that someone else claimed as hers. Derek was silent for a long moment. Then, I filed for divorce. Papers went through last week. I know. I'm looking for an apartment. I need to figure out who I am without her telling me who to be. That's probably a good idea. He turned to face me fully. Dad, I don't know how to make this right. What I let happen, what I was part of. I was a coward. I failed you in every way a son can fail his father. Yes, you did. I didn't soften it. He needed to hear the truth without cushioning. But you also stood up when it mattered. You told the truth when lying would have been easier. I paused. That doesn't erase what you did. But it's a start. Can we ever be okay again? I thought about it. About all the years we'd lost. About the boy who used to grip my hand learning to ride a bike. About the man who'd finally found the courage to be honest. Come to dinner, I said finally. Next month, Thanksgiving. His eyes widened with surprise. Really? Just the 2 of us. No guests, no surprises, no documents to sign. I almost smiled. I'll make the turkey. You bring the pie. Thanksgiving arrived on a cool, clear morning. I'd moved into my new condo by then, a 2-bedroom place overlooking downtown Nashville. The kitchen was smaller than my old one, but it felt more like mine. Derek showed up at noon carrying a pecan pie and a bottle of wine. He looked better than he had in months, still carrying the weight of everything that had happened. But there was life in his eyes again. We cooked together, made the stuffing from my wife's recipe, roasted the turkey until the skin was golden brown. When we sat down to eat, just the 2 of us at a small table by the window, I poured 2 glasses of wine. A year ago, I said, your wife stood up at my Thanksgiving table and announced she was taking control of my finances. Everyone applauded. I raised my glass. A lot has changed. Derek lifted his glass, meeting my eyes. To justice, I said, and to second chances. We drank. Outside, Nashville spread out below us, lights flickering on as evening approached. It wasn't the same as before. It never would be. But it was honest. It was real. And for the first time in a very long time, it felt like family. If you like this story, subscribe to our new channel, Cold Revenge, as this one will soon cease to exist. You can find a link to the new channel in the collaborations section of this video, in the description, or in the comments. Subscribe so you don't lose us and can continue listening to interesting stories about revenge. Thank you for your attention.